Okay. I'm calling the meeting to order of the July the 8th, 2020 meeting of the Indiana Environmental Rules Board. A quorum of the board is present. We welcome all of you to our first remote meeting. This might be interesting. We have Brian Clem, who is the communications director for IDEM and is a real guru at this. So he's going to walk us through all of this. Okay, Ryan, let me turn it over to you and you can provide the instructions.
Okay, and I'm letting people in here too, making sure these folks get in. And let me do one more thing just to turn off the waiting room so folks can go in. Okay, well, great. Thank you, Chairwoman Gard. My name is Ryan Clem, Communications Director at IDEM. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when not speaking. We will be taking questions and comments from the public. To ask a question or make a comment, please use the raise hand or chat feature to indicate your question, comment, or that you would like to speak. To access the raised hand or chat feature at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your device, you'll see the menu bar, and you may have to move your mouse or touch your screen to have that menu bar come up. In the middle of that menu, there's a chat icon, which you can click on, which will show the chat dialogue. You should also see the raised hand option there. So please utilize those two options, the raise hand or chat feature, if you have any questions or comments, and you will be called upon at the appropriate time. For those joining us by phone, if you have a question or comment, you can, quote, raise your hand by pressing *9 on your phone. Again, that's *9 for the folks on the phone. And when called upon, you'll also need to unmute your phone by pressing *6. So for everyone in today's meeting, please remember to identify yourself when speaking. For members of the public asking a question or making a comment, please clearly state your name for the record. If any members of the media have joined us, please utilize the chat feature or email media@idem.in.gov if you have any questions or would like to request an interview. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on IDEM's website in the near future. And with that, I'll turn the meeting back over to Chairwoman Gard.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryan. One thing will be a little bit different, well, several things in this meeting, but for everything that we normally just have a voice vote, we are going to have a roll call vote because otherwise it might be difficult to determine if there are any nay votes since we can't see everybody and sometimes we can't hear everybody. So I will be calling the roll for everything that we have that needs to be recorded. I'm now going to call the roll for the board of directors. Mr. Etzler. Bill Etzler here.
I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Okay. Dr. Alexandrovich.
I'm here.
Ms. Collier.
Here.
Mr. Davidson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Gilson.
Yes.
Mr. Horn.
Yes.
Dr. Nemec.
Yes.
Ms. Valenquit.
Yes.
Mr. Waske.
I'm here.
Ms. Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Schuler.
Here.
The Commissioner.
Here.
Pickett. And Mr. Rulon.
Here.
And the chair is here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 present. Our first order of business today is the approval of the summary of the January 8, 2020 board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the summary as presented? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve.
This is Ted Nemec, so moved.
there a second?
Rulon, second.
I'll call the roll. Mr. Essler,
Yes.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Gilson,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Ms. Fallquit,
Yes.
Mr. Waskey, Mr. Waskey.
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon, the chair votes aye. 14 ayes, 0 nays. Commissioner Pickett, your report, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us with this virtual meeting. We're getting used to it at our department. First, I'll have several things to report. First, I'd like to throw my congratulations out to Cam Clark, DNR Executive Director. It's my understanding that this is his last week at the Department of Natural Resources. And so it's with some sadness I say that, and I'm sorry he couldn't be with us today. He's been a partner of ours for years as the departments work together on mutual issues. And he started in the Department of Natural Resources as a general counsel. So he's been there quite a while. It'll be tough to fill Cam's shoes, but we are wishing Cam well in retirement. And if you see Cam out and about, congratulate him for his work at the Department of Natural Resources. I also wanted to give you all a little rundown on the agency's work during this current COVID pandemic, what we've been doing, and how we're moving forward. So when Governor Holcomb initially shut down the Indiana Government Center campus in, I think it was March now, we didn't know what to expect, but virtually all IDEM employees started working from home and have been working at home since that time for most of the time. Small skeleton crew continued to report to the office to ensure that documents that came into the office were distributed. And I want to thank those people that work at the agency that reported to the agency throughout the pandemic while the offices were closed to ensure that the offices continued running. The Governor Holcomb, as you know, laid out a plan that is on the Indiana government website called Back on Track Indiana. We're going through several phases. You probably heard that he tapped the brakes a little bit on the plan last week, talking about phase 4.5. As part of all of his back to work and reopening the state efforts, he tasked each state agency with coming up with a plan for reopening their offices. And since May, I think May 11th actually, we at the Department of Environmental Management have been slowly but surely rolling people back into the office. We still have the vast majority of our people working from home most of the time, but currently once every 2 weeks, everybody is reporting to the office. So we're continuing to do remote work as we were. In terms of the Government Center campus, it is open by appointment only currently, and eventually it will be open not on an appointment only basis. If you have business to conduct with the state of Indiana, and particularly the department, we'd ask that you call the employee or employees that you want to meet with, set up a meeting time, and the employees will be required when you arrive to greet you at the front door of our building and escort you to our offices. We much prefer at this time, given the fact that coronavirus is still, the pandemic is still in place, of course, meeting via Teams or some other telephonic method. We think we can accomplish a great deal doing that. And while you're on campus in the government center, everyone has been mandated by the governor to wear masks. So every IDEM employee will be wearing a mask. If you come into the building, you'll be offered a mask if you don't have one. And if you reach our floors without a mask, our receptionist will kindly ask you to put on a mask, and we'll provide you with one if you need it. And if it's not possible, then we'll arrange to have an electronic meeting with folks. So in terms of the substantive work we've been doing during the pandemic, IDEM has maintained its workload issuing permits. I was just reviewing our permit workload, and on a weekly basis, our offices are reporting to our agency what we're issuing, and we're issuing about what we issued on a regular basis when people were all in the office. We're operating at about we have a specific number of statutory days we're allowed to issue a permit within, and we're generally speaking issuing our permits in about 60% of the time allowed under statute. So we're still maintaining our good work with our permit issuance. We also received a report from our inspection crew indicating that the inspections we've been conducting, we're still issuing reports within the timeframes that we've allocated when we first proposed in 2017, greatly reducing the time frame for issuing inspection reports. Currently, we're issuing inspection reports on a rolling average of about 5 days from the time an inspection's been conducted. That again is a rolling average. So I wanted to mention that because it's important to note that the governor still expects us to get our work done. And so we're keeping track of the work we're doing, and we are issuing our expected workload product within timeframes that we've laid out. In terms of inspections, we have, during the pandemic, prioritized our inspections at wastewater and drinking water facilities, and in some facilities that were not related to water or wastewater, we held back on inspections altogether. And as the governor has reopened the government center, and as we've all been working to reopen the state, we've been taking a careful approach at rolling out our inspections around the state in a I think logical manner, and we're doing it for each of our inspection groups, whether it's solid waste facilities, underground storage tanks, wastewater or wetlands or confined feeding inspections. We have plans for how to roll those inspections back out, and we're doing it in a careful manner because we want to make sure both the facilities and our inspectors are safe when they go out into the field. So inspectors are now returning to the field and are conducting inspections. Also during the pandemic, IDEM employees, about 70 IDEM employees volunteered to help the State Department of Health at test sites throughout the state. As you know, the State Department of Health has been working hard to open up test sites throughout the state for people who suspected that they might have COVID. And as testing capacity grew, so too did the number of sites and IDEM's participation in that process. IDEM has been working at sites throughout the state, performing administrative, logistical, testing, transportation, and other tasks that help make sure that we can do our part to help the Department of Health at this time. So those are the kinds of activities we've been engaged in during the pandemic. A couple other issues I'd like to just mention to you folks, given the fact that they've either been relevant to the board or they've been in the news lately. First, you'll remember that recently the board faced a vote on use attainability analysis for the city of Indianapolis regarding its combined sewer systems. And communities throughout the state, there are 108 of them, are going through processes to reduce the number of discharges from their combined sewers. And as they complete their projects, they're coming to our agency asking for the same kind of permission that the city of Indianapolis has asked for. And tomorrow the agency will be issuing a letter to the city of Fort Wayne approving their use attainability analysis, which is the analysis that's required to grant the combined sewer overflow subcategory designation that the board voted on for Indianapolis. So in the upcoming months and in the upcoming years, we will see more of these kinds of things come to the Environmental Rules Board. And I just wanted to let you know that Fort Wayne is the next one up. So we'll do presentations and do a little education piece for the board before that actually comes up for a vote to refresh your memory. But I just wanted to put it on your radar screen that will be coming up in the future. Secondly, in the news recently, the town of Andrews, Indiana, featured prominently. I know Bill Etzler worked up in the Fort Wayne area, and Andrews is near Fort Wayne in that area. And Andrews issued an order on June 19th to the residents of its community not to drink the water and not to use the water. And IDEM was alerted to this order a couple of days later by the county health department. The town was concerned because one of the wells, they have 3 drinking water wells. So they receive their drinking water from wells as opposed to surface water. And in 2012, one of the 3 wells was shut down because a local company, Rayethon, had contamination. The contamination from its industrial processes actually reached one of the wells. And IDEM, in its Office of Land Quality, had investigated the cleanup efforts by that company and had talked to the city and town of Andrews and told the town that it probably be wise to shut down the first well of the 3 drinking water wells in that town. And in 2012, the town did shut down that well. Little did we know, but earlier this year in May, the town restarted that well in an effort to ensure that it had capacity regarding some firefighting issues. And it's my understanding that once it started the well, it didn't shut it down. And that well, the agency knew had contaminants, volatile organic compounds, and in the raw water. That is the water that comes into the well before it's treated and distributed to residents. The town was concerned about that. They had reopened the well without notifying the agency. It had contaminants in the raw water. They did not shut down the well, and then they issued an order to to the residents not to drink the water. When the agency found out about it, we immediately dispatched investigators and inspectors. We conducted tests of the raw and the finished water. As expected, the raw water in the first well did have contaminants in it. The finished water that was delivered to people's homes after blending and treatment did not contain contaminants. And in the history of the documentation that had been submitted to our agency on a regular basis, we had not seen any indications of violations of the Safe Drinking Water Act or any data that indicated that the city should shut down their drinking water. We asked the city once again to shut down their drinking water well number 1. They did shut it down. Then we requested that the city flush the drinking water treatment lines. It did flush the drinking water treatment lines, and we retested the water again and found absolutely no contaminants in the water being delivered to people's homes. And so they shut down the well that had contamination. We retested the water. The company of Raytheon had been out and testing the water. You should also know that the Raytheon folks knew that there was a contaminants, and the way that they were dealing with it was to put in place what is known as an air stripper, which is a device that helps to strip out volatile organic compounds and prevent problems from occurring in water. The town was worried that that air stripper had failed. It had not failed, and there was no indication that it had failed. After several tests and after our results, the city agreed to take off the do not drink water order, and the town is now delivering water that was in the first place, is currently, and in all data that's been submitted to this agency has always been meeting the Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. So I know that there's been press about this. I wanted you to know what we knew about it, and we continue to stay in touch with both the town and the company Raytheon. Raytheon recently, as of today, sent a letter to the town indicating that it would be happy to provide funds to clean out the 2 additional wells that currently provide clean and safe drinking water to residents. There's an increasing concern about capacity by the town, and in a typical well situation, every so often the wells need to be cleaned out to ensure that the same capacity exists for providing the clean and safe water. The company has offered to provide payment to clean out those 2 other wells. So that's the issue with Andrews. We continue to stay on top of that, and our inspectors are out visiting the site and in continuing investigations. Finally, you may know on a federal level, the US EPA recently issued a new Waters of the United States rule. That rule does provide a different kind of guidance in terms of the regulation of water bodies, and would potentially narrow the kind of authority for agencies to regulate specific water bodies. We're studying the rule. It's a big rule, but we are also operating under a state statute that defines waters of the state of Indiana that it is, I would say, broader than the newly issued federal rule, and therefore our regulatory processes for the moment are not changing. Also, we expect to see appeals of this rule, and the process for finalizing that rule and getting out of the federal courts will be probably a long one. So I don't expect to see that change the regulatory landscape in the near future. And that's my report for activity at the agency, Commissioner Gard. Chairman Gard.
Are there any questions for the commissioner? Anybody have questions?
Beverly, Bill Etzler here.
Yes, Bill.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Yes.
The situation with Andrews, the media coverage certainly does not mirror your report to the board, because the issue as it was reported was that the contamination had reached all the homes, and that it was of great concern to the residents. And it also did not mention that the well had been previously shut down in 2012 and then reopened without the agency's being noticed. So they made I really wish the media would report all of the facts, I guess, in these situations, but I'm not sure we can ever hope for that to happen, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately. Mhm.
So thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
You're
Are
welcome.
there other questions? Commissioner, I had one question.
Yes.
With a number of the rules and the other things that you all are doing, you have work groups. Has this having to do virtual meetings, has that affected your the number of work groups that are actually active right now?
I think that getting used to the format has probably slowed down the creation of work groups and the number, but we are making adjustments along the way, just getting people used to this format. And we expect that that we'll be able to straighten things out. You know, I don't believe that the COVID situation is going away anytime soon. So I think our preferred method of organizing and getting together in work groups will continue to be this kind of format. And different people are used to different systems, of course, and each one is just slightly different. And there's always a bit of a glitch, which is why it's great to have Ryan. But yeah, it's slowed us down a little bit in terms of putting together work groups and getting them started. So if there's folks that are waiting for a work group to be started, I know that, especially a rules work group, I know just have a little patience with us. We'll be getting folks together.
Okay, thank you so much, and wish Cam Clark the best for us. We appreciate his attendance at the meetings over the last few years.
Thank you.
Chris Pedersen, rulemaking report.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Pedersen in the Rules Development section of the Office of Legal Counsel. I have several topics to cover for board members today. First, I would like to talk about upcoming board meetings. We are anticipating 2 more meetings this year, one on September 9th and one on November 18th, to work through the rules that have been delayed because we've been unable to hold board meetings since early this year. Our normal conference room for these meetings has been canceled for the rest of the year, so we expect these next 2 meetings to probably be held remotely. These plans are tentative and subject to change depending on circumstances and direction from the governor, but we will keep everyone informed if there's any necessary changes. Carla Kendrick will continue to send out boards to board members electronically, but if you want a paper copy also mailed, please be sure to let her know. If you've already requested a paper copy for this meeting, we'll assume you want to continue to receive paper copies for future meetings, and so you're already on the list. Second, as far as current office activities, Bruno touched on this already, but generally the IDEM's rule staff are in the office 1 day per 2-week period and working remotely the rest of the time. Therefore, tasks that need to be done in the office will be handled as expeditiously as possible, but due to the working remotely, any early requests would be greatly appreciated so that we can get them done more in the office. Also, the IDEM's rule staff can access voicemail messages remotely, but we encourage you to communicate with us by email, as it's the surest way to reach us as we work remotely. As always, feel free to contact Carla or myself if you have any questions related to the rules and the scheduling. Third, I'd like to briefly describe the rules that we anticipate being ready for your consideration in September. First, the emergency rules being presented today for the Vigo County SO2 redesignation and Marion County SO2 redesignation are expected to need to be renewed again. And another one for Lake and Porter 8-hour ozone will probably be available, or will probably be needed for consideration at that time also. There are 2 rules that were already preliminarily adopted that should be ready for final adoption in September. Those are the NPDES General Permits Rule. That one was preliminarily adopted in August of 2019. And the Transfer Station Reporting Rule, which was preliminarily adopted in January of this year. Then in addition to those, we have a rulemaking, which is the Vigo County SO2 redesignation. It may be also including Lake and Porter ozone, and then some corrections to PM 2.5 effective dates. This part of this is the subject of the emergency rule for Vigo County that's before you today. The regular rulemaking we're hoping will be ready to bring to you in September. For Vigo County, it's the adoption of the federal redesignation for Fayette and Harrison Townships in Vigo County for the 2010 SO2 standard from non-attainment to attainment. And this provides consistency with the current federal designations. Another one is the air permit fee updates rule. That would be up for preliminary adoption. The fee increases for the Title V air permit program that were required by House Enrolled Act 1278 and that were approved by the board on August 14th, 2019. At that time, will be put into the rules formally. We have the fee, the air permit fees in the rules, and so this rulemaking simply updates those fees. The rulemaking, the statute does require that the increases be adopted before January 1st of 2022, so we're hoping to get that accomplished by that time. We're also hoping to have the NOx emissions monitoring rule for preliminary adoption. This rule revises existing monitoring and reporting requirements for certain fossil fuel boilers to add an alternative for monitoring and reporting of NOx emissions. And the alternative that is being proposed is consistent with a recently released federal rule. And then finally, we have, every year we have the review of non-expiring rules for each of our groups. So titles 326, 327, and 329. Review of non-expiring rules will be brought before you for consideration. Each year it's brought to you to determine if any rulemaking needs to be started from those. And so we'll have those ready at the same time. And that is the end of my report. Be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Chris? Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Today we have 2 emergency rules that the board will be asked to adopt: Vigo County SO2 redesignation and Marion County SO2 redesignation. We will also have 2 presentations from the agency. The first will be the presentation of the non-rule policy document regarding the independent closure process. The second presentation will be the annual 303D list presentation regarding the 2020 list of impaired waters. The rules being considered at today's meeting will include board packets, were included in the board packets, and are available for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel, 13th floor, Indiana Government Center. The entire board packet is also available on IDEM's website at least 1 week prior to each board meeting. A written transcript of today's meeting will be made. The transcript and any written submissions will be open for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel. A copy of the transcript will be posted on the rules page of the agency website when it becomes available. The board will now consider adoption of an emergency rule to revise 326 IEC 1-4-85 to redesignate Vigo County to attainment for the 2010 sulfur dioxide National Ambient Air Quality Standard. The draft emergency rule found in today's board packet is entered into the record of the meeting. Krystal Hackney will present the rule. Krystal?
Good afternoon, members of the board. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Krystal Hackney, and I'm a rule writer in the Rules Development section within the Office of Legal Counsel. This rule temporarily revises 326 IAC 1-4-85 to redesignate parts of Vigo County for the 2010 sulfur dioxide National Ambient Air Quality Standard from non-attainment to attainment for consistency with the federal redesignation published in the Federal Register on July 8th of 2019. The parts of Vigo County that are affected by this rulemaking are Fayette and Harrison Township. State air permits must be issued in accordance with either the designations in 326 IAC 1-4 or an effective emergency rule that supersedes the existing state rule. This emergency rule will allow IDEM to permit affected sources under the appropriate air permitting rule until the formal rulemaking is completed. This emergency rule was most recently adopted on January 8th of 2020 and included a change for the status of Lake and Porter counties for the 2008 8-hour ozone standard. The status of Lake and Porter counties in relation to ozone has changed since January, so the Lake and Porter ozone status will be addressed in a separate rulemaking. Today's adoption of the emergency rule is necessary to maintain the current federal designations under the regular rulemaking, or until the regular rulemaking is completed, sorry. IDEM requests that the board adopt this emergency rule as presented, and I'm available to answer any further questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Krystal about the emergency rule? Thank you, Krystal. Any board discussion? Need a motion to adopt the emergency rule? Is there a motion to adopt the emergency rule?
Calvin Davidson, so moved.
Is there a second?
Luann Alexander, second.
We'll call the roll. Mr. Etzler?
Yes.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Collier?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Gilson?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Dr. Nemec?
Yes.
Ms. Faliquette?
Yes.
Mr. Waskey?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Rulon?
Yes.
The chair votes aye. The vote is 14 ayes, 0 nays. The board will now consider adoption of an emergency rule to revise 326 IAC 1-4-50 to redesignate 3 townships in Marion County to attainment for the 2010 sulfur dioxide National Ambient Air Quality Standard. The draft emergency rule found in today's board packet is entered into the record of the meeting. Seth Engdahl, I don't know that I'm pronouncing it correctly.
That's right.
Will present the rule. And I apologize for the lawnmower. I can't help their schedule.
Members of the board, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
My name is Seth Engdahl, and I'm a rule writer in the Rule Development Branch within IDEM's Office of Legal Counsel. The emergency rule currently under consideration would supersede 326 IAC 1-4-50. This section is comprised of an attainment status table for certain air pollutants in Marion County. The only change being made is the status of Center, Perry, and Wayne townships, which is being changed from non-attainment to attainment for the 2010 1-hour primary sulfur dioxide National Ambient Air Quality Standard. We are making this change to maintain consistency with the federal designation that was published in the Federal Register on May 21st of this year. IDEM is requesting that the board approve this emergency rule so that affected sources can be permitted under the appropriate state rule while the regular rulemaking to incorporate these changes into the Indiana Administrative Code is completed. If adopted, permits issued to sources in Center, Perry, and Wayne townships would be issued under prevention of significant deterioration pursuant to 326 IAC 2-2. Currently, sources are issued permits under emissions offset pursuant to 326 IAC 2-3, which is more restrictive. IDEM requests that the board approve this emergency rule as presented, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Seth? No, any board discussion? Hearing none, I need a motion to adopt the emergency rule.
Joanne Alexandrovich, so moved.
Need a second?
Ken Ruland, second.
I'll call the roll. Mr. Etzler,
Yes.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Gilson,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Dr. Nemick,
Yes.
Ms. Fallaqua,
Yes.
Mr. Waskey,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon.
Yes.
Chair votes aye. 14 ayes, 0 nays. The emergency rule is adopted. Today we have a presentation of a non-rule policy, the independent closure process guidance. Mr. Doug Laux will present the policy to the board. Mr. Laux?
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I bring in the independent closure process, NPD, before the board for your approval. This is currently a process that is being managed out of a separate section, but with a little bit of informality. We made some changes or plan to make changes to this NPD to provide a little bit more structure to the program. And how it operates, and also to give no further action letter once this is completed. Briefly to describe what this is, it is a process by which the agency and external stakeholders involved in investigation and remediation of petroleum releases that are considered to be very low threat. Is to relieve some of the regulatory burden and costs, both for the agency and management of that, but also for the external stakeholders to meet agency's needs in order to address the contamination as it is. IDEM, let's see. Yeah, so this policy is mainly just to create a little bit more consistency and efficiency at the facilities where these releases pose a low threat to human health and the environment. Responsible persons that meet the requirements for independent closure process approval will receive a no further action letter at the conclusion of the release, or at the conclusion of investigation and any remediation that may be necessary. That's different than how it currently functions now. They don't get a no further action letter or anything that's quite that final. We put this up, and it's worth noting we did not receive any comments during the comment period. It's just to define what we will be utilizing to define things as a low threat. These are solely petroleum releases. They are petroleum releases to the soil, and where groundwater dissolved contamination does not go beyond the facility boundary. So if you have any offsite contamination, it is not going to be eligible for the independent closure process. It does not create, the release doesn't create any completed exposure pathways to receptors. In other words, there's no direct contact, there's no tap water where people are drinking it, and there's no vapor intrusion. And also any of the light non-aqueous phase liquids have been recovered to the extent practicable before the eligibility of being accepted into this program. Just as a little bit of background, we had in 2019 172 confirmed new releases, and based on some preliminary research by our technical staff, right at about approximately 50% of those releases would be suitable for the independent closure process. And basically, as I said before, it limits a little bit of the IDEM oversight than the traditional method, which is much more rigid and iterative investigations and reporting and response to IDEM comment letters. It can be very responsive. It can be very cumbersome for some of these low threat releases. While the traditional method is necessary at releases that pose a greater risk, it may require some unnecessary costs for these releases where it can be demonstrated that is no unacceptable risk of exposure. The cost savings can be redirected to the facilities and releases that require substantial investigation and remediation. And that goes for both the agency's resources as well as the external resources. It is our opinion that the no further action letter that will culminate in completion of the ICB process provides a greater level of comfort for RPs and potential purchasers and also lending institutions. The regulated community welcomes the opportunity to independently investigate and remediate low threat sites because the traditional method, again, can be cumbersome and onerous and also time consuming and sometimes can be expensive. By improving this customer service and utilizing our tax dollars more responsible and efficiently, we believe this MPD is right in line with Pillar 4 of Governor Holcomb's 5 pillars for state improvement. And I think, just to troubleshoot, so prior to initiation and acceptance into this ICP program, there is still going to be a 60-day initial investigation required for any of these releases to provide the agency with enough information to make that determination that it is indeed a low threat and is suitable for that. So nobody's going to be automatically going in there without us having investigated it first. Any RP that doesn't comply with the ICP framework that's laid out in the NPD will be brought back into the standard project management of the agency as with all of the other releases. And I think that's pretty much all the notes I have. The last one, yeah. So we will be constantly keeping up with the documents that are sent in, and in order to ensure that we are adequately protected, even if someone is in this independent closure process, we're reserving that right to reprioritize any release if new information comes about that shows that it is not a low threat, and again, manage that under the traditional project management approach. And with that, I can take any questions.
I have one. What kind of long-term surveillance or follow-up does IDEM have to make sure that after closure and they're through with the process, that there still isn't a risk?
Sure. So the no further action would go through the same scrutiny based on the information. We'll go through our technical services group as the traditional, as a more traditional project management. So at the end of the project, we would still be reviewing all of the information submitted by the responsible party and their consultant, and evaluating that based on the risk factors prior to issuance of any no further action response from the agency. So it would be the same. It would get the same level of scrutiny as the other traditional methods would currently.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have questions?
Doug, this is Paul Gilson, Eli Lilly and Company. Just wondering if there's any certification requirements for the consultants who sign the closure completion report.
Yes, they will. So to verify our compliance at closure, we will have a completion form. It's going to be signed with an attestation that what's been provided is accurate and true by both the responsible party and a certified environmental professional.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have a question?
Yes, this is Joanne Alexandrovich. I'm just wondering, under the policy, you have the independent closure process guide. Is that put together, or are you working on that still?
I think we are still putting some final touches on that. I would have to check with my technical staff to make sure exactly where we are with that.
So can you get an answer and get back to Dr. Alexandrovich with that?
Yes, yeah, definitely. We can follow up with that.
Well, I'm just wondering if this process doesn't happen until you have that guide available to parties, right?
Right. And they would agree when they are going in to follow this guide prior to approval, and when they submit an application for acceptance into this ICP program, or ICP process, I should say.
Okay, that's all I need, Chairman Gard. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have questions?
Chairwoman Gard, this is Ryan. There was one, a D. Livingston, did not have a microphone, and I can read her question if you like.
Please.
Says for ELTF eligible sites that fall under ICP criteria, how does the limited item oversight work with items moved towards cost pre-approval for ELTF eligible work?
The pre-approval process would work the same as it would right now. So once they were accepted into the, they had ICP approval, they would then submit any work plans or remediation plans as necessary, and seek pre-approval of those costs in the same way they would right now, and they would go through the exact same process as under the traditional method. Obviously, the whole, I guess the expectation would be that these are lower risk, and there would be perhaps less actual work required and less burden, so those costs would be less.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we will move on to the 303D list presentation. Today we have the presentation of the 2020 list of impaired waters and consolidated assessment and listing methodology under section 303D of the Clean Water Act, known as 303D list. Jody, author, will present the list.
Good afternoon, members of the board and others in attendance. My name is Jody Arthur. I work for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management as its Integrated Report Coordinator, and I'm here to present Indiana's 2020 3D list of impaired waters. Give me just one moment, and I'm going to switch to screen share. If I may have to have Ryan's assistance here. Let's see, what share screen. Okay, let's try this. All right.
There you are.
There I am. So now I get to figure out the slideshow part. Okay. Play from start. Okay, there we go. So I will try to be brief. What I want to do is give you a little bit of context about what the 303D list is and how we develop it, and then we'll talk about some of the results and differences between this year's the 2020 303D list and the one prior. And I will leave you with some key takeaways. So one moment. All right. So the Clean Water Act, Section 303D list of impaired waters requires that states identify waters that are found to be impaired. That means they are not supporting of one or more of their designated uses. There are several designated uses in our water quality standards, and we do not assess for all of them. Rather, we assess for those that have the most stringent water quality criteria. These would be aquatic life use, recreational use, and public water supply. And our rationale here is that because these uses have the most stringent criteria of all the uses, we can reasonably assume that if we are protecting for these uses, the other uses will be likewise protected. So we focus our efforts on protecting those uses that have the most stringent water quality criteria. We also assess for fish consumption, and while this is not a designated use in our water quality standards, these assessments are required by US EPA, and they're aimed at providing better information about the state of our waters in terms of consuming the fish caught from them. So a little bit about the 303D list itself. It is submitted to US EPA as part of Indiana's Integrated Water Monitoring and Assessment Report every 2 years. This process includes a state-mandated 90-day public comment period. This year we held that public comment period from January 29th to April 28th. We received no comments from the public on our 303D list this year. The notice of comment basically describes any changes that we've made to the 303D list since its last submittal, and it also includes items methodology so that people can understand how we are developing this list and assessing impairments. So, whoops, went backwards, my apologies. Okay, so the 303D list is actually part of the state's consolidated list, which is a larger list. It summarizes everything that IDEM knows about water quality on Indiana's surface waters. So on this consolidated list, we put all surface waters in the state into one of 5 main categories for each of those designated uses I just described. These categories, category 1 is for waters where all of those designated uses I described have been assessed and all of them are fully supporting. I can tell you that we don't have a lot of waters in category 1, and that's primarily the result of, I mean, we just don't have all water. It's rare to monitor waters for all those uses just because of the work involved. We monitor a lot of waters, but to get all 4 on the same water is difficult. So category 2 is where the designated use has been assessed and it is fully supporting, and that there are no other water uses that are impaired to our knowledge. These waters we consider are good waters. And we have quite a number of category 2 waters in the state. Category 3 is where we put waters there where we don't have enough information to assess the uses. We just don't have the data yet, or the data is insufficient in some way to assess those uses. Category 4 is where the use is impaired, but a TMDL is not required. TMDL is, for those of you who've not heard of that before, is the total maximum daily load, which is the calculation of the maximum amount of a pollutant that you can have in a water body and still meet the water quality standards for that pollutant. TMDLs are required by US EPA under Clean Water Act Section 303D, hence the name 303D list. That's where we put waters that do not require a TMDL. We put those in category 4. Category 5 is where we have an impairment and a TMDL is still required. And that category 5, is the actual 303D list. Now, while that's the case, category 5 is the actual 303D list. It is important to consider both categories 4 and 5 together if you're interested in understanding the full picture of known impairments to Indiana waters. Okay, so now IDEM is currently in the process of submitting its integrated report, which includes the 303D list, through US EPA's new ATTAINS data system. The ATTAINS is EPA's assessment, total maximum daily load tracking and implementation system. It's a big mouthful, so we just call it ATTAINS. This is an online database that automates and streamlines the data management part and our IR integrated report submittals, which include the 303D list. In 2018, IDEM moved all of its water quality assessment data into ATTAINS, but we still submitted a separate paper report to US EPA. And in 2020, this is the first cycle where all the components of the integrated report have been submitted through this new system. So ATTAINS, in addition to the better management and streamlined submittals, ATTAINS really helps IDEM tell a more accurate picture of water quality. It makes it easier to track and report on high quality waters. As I said, Indiana has a good number of high quality waters that are in category 2. However, with the old system, it was harder to track that information accurately or with much detail, and ATTAINS fixes that. It does make it easier to track those waters, and in the short term, it's going to require some extensive data management work and review and pulling all that information from past assessments, because remember, the older system didn't really track that very well. So we're going to try and get all that pulled together, and we hope to have that done by 2022, all those past assessments. But now, as of now, we are entering all fully supporting information, as opposed to impairments only, into ATTAINS for all new assessments going forward. So as we get some of that data management stuff done, we will be able to tell a more accurate story about water quality in Indiana. So it's kind of a nice thing there. So shifting gears a bit, Let's just take a look at the category 5, the 303D list itself. We have roughly 6,500 impairments, and those impairments were found on 4,299 individual water bodies. So the way we do our assessments, a water body can have one or more impairments on a single water body. The vast majority there is obviously, if you look at the table below, the vast majority there here are on streams. This is mostly a function of how we monitor. We just simply monitor more on our streams than we do on our lakes. Nonetheless, we do have some lake impairments as well. And then category 4, remember I said you've got to kind of understand both sides of that to understand the full picture of impairment. The total number of impairments in category 4 is 3,029 impairments on 2,662 individual water bodies. Most of those, again, being streams. I should say too that the numbers here for lakes does not include Lake Michigan, which is 154,176 acres. So we don't include Lake Michigan in this table because it would really skew the numbers there, but it is impaired there are 2 impairments on Lake Michigan, fish consumption impairments. So just know that that's impaired too, but it's not included on these tables. So now the vast majority of these, of category 4 waters, all but about 200 of those impairments are in category 4A. That means that the TMDL for them has been developed by IDEM and approved by US EPA. And the rest are in category, those other 200 or so are in categories 4B and 4C, which do not require a TMDL. So here's a map. This map is just intended to show you, again, that full picture of impairment. On the left, you see category 5 waters. Those are the ones that that still require a total maximum daily load. And category 4 waters are shown on the right. So together, those are the impaired waters in Indiana. Please know that for simplicity's sake, I don't map all the waters because it becomes a very messy map very quickly, but this is not the majority of waters in the state. So we have a lot of waters that if I were able to map it and make a nice clean map, you would see a lot of blue in there as well. So this is the total picture of impairment as of the 2020 cycle. The top causes of impairments. You know, I've been in this job for almost 15 years, well, in this position, 15 years, and there have been no changes in the top causes of impairment over that time. This table never changes other than, you know, the numbers change a little bit each cycle, but these are still the top causes of impairment. The E. coli in the top is, that is a recreational use impairment. The biological integrity, dissolved oxygen, and nutrients are aquatic life use impairments. And the PCBs in fish tissue and mercury in fish tissue are fish consumption impairments. So I've broken it out here by those for which we've completed TMDLs in category 4 and those in category 5 on the 303D list. So also, I meant to mention that after mercury and fish tissue, the numbers of impairments for any one parameter drops off to less than 100 for any one type of impairment. So those really are the big ones. So now in terms of the summary of changes, there weren't any big changes in 2020. However, I do think we're going in the right direction because there were 210 fewer impairments and 92 fewer water bodies impaired. And 31 of those impairments on 26 water bodies were actually found to have water quality improvements. Now, the remaining changes were the result of this ongoing review. We are constantly looking for errors in the data and making sure our assessments are accurate. And we invariably, with such a large data set, find problems every cycle. So we make those changes. The other things that change is as we develop TMDLs, and once those are approved, those waters go in out of category 5 and are moved into category 4. So that does not necessarily mean that they're no longer impaired. However, we have found water bodies for which a TMDL is approved that have then subsequently been improved. So that does happen. Okay, so some of the key takeaways again. Again, there were no major changes in the types or in the number of impairments that IDEM has found this cycle. Our monitoring, assessment, and TMDL development continues. We have almost 3,000 TMDLs now approved for impaired waters, and we continue to monitor a significant number of sites every year, 250 to 275. And the map there gives you some idea of our monitoring activities. Those are the sites we have monitored in about the last decade. So we do a lot of monitoring. So we are producing a lot of data to do our assessments. And another thing I might mention too that isn't shown on this presentation is that Indiana now leads the country in terms of its success stories, which document, success stories are part of EPA's strategic measures, and they document water quality improvements as a result from typically non-point source activities, restoration activities that are going on in Indiana. And now our programs are leading the country in the number of stories published. If anyone is interested in getting that information or finding out more about those, they are documented. The most recent ones are documented in the integrated report, which will be on our website soon, or you can contact me directly. My contact information is here. The website that you see here will be updated shortly within the next week or so with the integrated report materials. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Oh, thank you, Jody. That was good. Are there questions for Jody?
Yeah, I have questions. This is Joanne Alexandrovich. First, congratulations on leading the list of success stories.
Yes, nice.
My two questions are that Attain, is that available to the public? And then my second question is, do we know what the source, do you have information on the source of E. coli contamination?
Okay, so let's take those one at a time. Attains is a system that EPA has built for states to do their data management. It is part of a larger system, and the public-facing part of Attains, like as a state agency, we use Attains to do this data management stuff. The information we put into Attains is served out on a public website called How's My Waterway. And it's kind of beta still. It's a very new website. If anyone's familiar with the old Surf Your Watershed application, it's kind of a new version of that. So the information that we feed into Attains feeds right into that system. I have not looked at that lately to see how good it looks, so to speak. But it's been in development for the last couple of years. So yes, the information is available. If anyone is interested in that, please write down my contact information and let me know, and I will get you the link to that site. Now, to your second question about sources of E. coli, I'd have to say no, and the reason I say no is because the way we monitor in order to identify impairments, to find the impairments. And that's partly driven by EPA mandates about, what they want us to be doing with our monitoring funds that they provide through our Clean Water Act 106 grant. So in order to meet most of our monitoring objectives, we're out there doing the monitoring to find the problems. But in order to understand sources of impairment, you have to it requires a different study design, and it requires far more robust data than our current resources provide. And we would need far more resources to definitively say, this is the source of impairment for these impairments. So basically, early on in the first stages of our monitoring and assessment, you can kind of think of it as a recon in a way, that we're out there, we're finding these impairments. Then once we find these impairments, as they're placed into the 303D list and moved and picked up for total maximum daily load development, that's where that monitoring occurs, that more robust monitoring occurs. So we do get that information, but it isn't at this stage in the process. It is not at the assessment stage. Now, when we do water quality assessments, we take into consideration things like land uses, field observations, location and records of permitted facilities. So we take a lot of, whether a community's sewered or not, we take a lot of those things into consideration when we do assessments and try to assess the most likely sources, but those are not definitive or known at that point. I hope that answers your question. Can I?
Yes, it did very much. Thank you. I did think of one other question.
Sure.
Does the nutrient impairments, does that give us a sense of how Indiana might affect the dead zones in the Gulf?
Again, no. And the reason for that is because it's not, we're using, nutrients, as you probably already know, is a very complex, there's complex interactions that work together between the different parameters, nutrient related parameters, that often they have synergistic kinds of effects at levels that are below any criteria that you might have, and we don't have numeric criteria. So it's hard to look at that within the larger sense of the dead zone in New Mexico or in the Gulf of Mexico. So that sort of thing is better to look at through modeling, I believe.
Other questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Ryan. One question from Indra Frank for Jody. Jody, you reported 31 improved impairments in 2020. Is that improvement relative to 2018?
Yes, that means that it was either listed in 2018 or it would have been listed in 2018. Now, it might have been listed in category 4. I'd have to parse out those details, but those waters, those 32 waters or so, are waters that were previously known to be impaired. We went and collected additional data that shows them meeting the water quality standards for that use now. So we had data saying they were a problem, and now we've got subsequently collected data that shows they are no longer a problem.
Any other questions, Ryan, from the public?
I do not see any now.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Well, thank you so much, Jody. That was very good.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now we go to the open forum. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board today? And Ryan, you're going to have to take over that and give us the name of the person.
Sure. And just as a reminder, if you'd like to ask, you can unmute yourself or use the raise hand or chat feature. I don't see any currently.
Okay, well, we'll close the open forum if no one wants to address the board. Well, the next meeting of the Environmental Rules Board, as Chris said, is tentatively set for Wednesday, September the 9th, 2020 at 1:30. We anticipate again that it will be a remote meeting. If there's any changes, certainly we will let you know. I want everyone to stay safe, and we'll see you in September. But we do need a motion to adjourn and a second, and then a roll call vote.
So moved. This is Ted Nemec. Ken Rulon, second.
Okay, Ms. Ressler,
Yes.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Gilson,
Yes.
Mr. Horn. Mr. Horn, he must have left. Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Ms. Valaquit,
Yes.
Mr. Walski,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Or Ms. Nelson, I apologize. Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. So that would be 13 ayes, 0 nays. We are adjourned. Thank you, commission. And thank you, staff.
Thank you.
And especially Ryan, thank you for getting us through this.